it is fall pumpkin season. So we're gonna make some harvest pumpkin brownies. So I've got 2 cups of pumpkin puree. This is just homemade pumpkin puree. You can also buy store-bought. The store-bought is gonna be much thicker. The puree that usually if you do it yourself and you cook it on the stove and you add water, it is runnier. So for my recipe, I will be adding a little bit extra flour. So, but if you buy the store-bought pumpkin puree, it's going to be much thicker and you can cut back on your flour. So I have 2 cups of my pumpkin puree and I have 4 eggs and 3/4 of a cup of oil. We're just going to put all of this in the mixer and mix it together. I also have 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. And I have 4 teaspoons of cinnamon, 1 teaspoon of ginger powder, half a teaspoon of nutmeg, half a teaspoon of allspice, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, and 1 teaspoon of baking soda, and half a teaspoon of salt. So you're just going to get all those spices in there, and 2 cups of sugar. And I have 2 to 3 cups of flour, depending on if you're using the homemade or your store-bought pumpkins. I'm going to start with 2 to see how runny my dough is. If it's too runny, I'll add extra flour. So always start with your 2, and we're going to go from there. We're just going to mix this up so it all comes together. And I'll scrape the side of my bowl. So you can see my dough is fairly runny, so I will add some more. Not sure if I'll quite need the full cup. I just don't want it to be too runny. But I will add for sure half a cup first. Scrape that again. Still fairly runny, so I think I will use my full cup of flour. Just make sure you scrape right to the bottom because there's often flour that gets stuck on the bottom. But usually that store-bought pumpkin puree is much thicker. So we're just going to get all of this mixed. And we're going to put it in a cookie sheet because you're making a brownie, you want it to be nice and thin. And then we're going to also ice it with a cream cheese frosting. So you're just going to get your dough mixed up and we're going to get it into our cookie sheet. So I'll show you what that looks like once I got it ready to go in the oven. Alright, so I've got my cookie sheet 12 by 17 by 1 inch high, greased, and I'm getting my dough in here so you can see the consistency of the dough. And we're going to put this in a 350-degree oven for about 20 minutes. It's not very thick, so you won't have to be in for too long. And you have to check it with a toothpick to make sure it comes out clean. So you want to make sure it's cooked all the way through. So I will show you what that looks like once I get it out of the oven. My harvest pumpkin brownies were in for 20 minutes on 350, and you can always just double check with a toothpick, make sure your toothpick comes out clean. And usually you can tell when the edges start to pull away from the pan a little bit and get a little darker, they're usually all baked up. So we're going to let this cool before we put our icing on, but we're just going to make a cream cheese frosting for it. So I have 8 ounces of cream cheese and half a cup of margarine, and I'm going to get these whipped up and get it nice and soft. And add in my icing sugar and also 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. So I'm just going to whip this up first. I want this to be nice and fluffy, so I'm going to give this a minute or 2. So I'll show you what that looks like. Alright, so I've got my cream cheese and my margarine beat up for a bit there. And now I'm going to add in my 2 cups of icing sugar. You just want to make sure that your cream cheese and your butter was at room temperature because you don't want to have any lumps in there. Start this on low because otherwise the icing sugar will poof up in your face. And I also have 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract that I'm going to add into there. You'll need to scrape your bowl once or twice and then mix it up for a good minute or 2. You want it nice and fluffy. cream cheese is nicely whipped up, nice and soft. So we're going to put this on our brownies once they've cooled. Mine are still a bit too warm to the touch, otherwise your icing is just going to melt. So we want that to be cooled down to room temperature before we put our cream cheese on. So I will show you what that looks like once this is all cooled down and ready to go. All right, so if your bars are all cooled down, you can get your cream cheese frosting on. If you're all about pumpkin spice and all that, these ones are for you. It's got such a wonderful aroma with all those spices in there. Give this one a try. This is your Harvest Pumpkin Brownies.